Great. So welcome everybody. This is session 2 of the unit we are doing on domestic and family violence. So CHCDFV001. There are 3 sessions and we are at that middle space. So it's pretty heavy going, this particular topic, but as a worker in the field, you will find a lot of your clients will have experienced or know someone who has experienced this. When we're working as youth workers, a lot of the young people that we have come through may have grown up all their lives in a setting where there is conflict, and that the parents and caregivers were actually affected by domestic and family violence. And the young people may view this as, this is how we communicate, this is our family's love language, this is how our family show each other that we're a unit, but we need to talk about what are the presenting issues, the impact that has on our clients, and how we as workers can help them with that. So I will just double checking that I have everybody. Thanks so much for checking in, and I will jump out. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of housekeeping as well. I've got my check-ins. Thank you everybody for letting me know how you're traveling this week, and make sure that you do your self-care, particularly around this subject, but just simply because I know you're coming into this space as adult learners, but after a big day, no matter what you do during your day. So I'd like to welcome everybody in class tonight, and then also everybody who is watching our recording, and to reach out. So let's jump in. So I won't be recording the videos, so there will be some breaks in our session and our recording, but I will stay back after class, and I will keep recording and just cover a little bit more around this particular topic for you. And of course, if there's any questions, please just let me know what they are, and I'll be happy to break them down for you. So the reason why we've got quite a lot of videos tonight is there's different perspectives from people who are frontline workers. So as far as your role plays go for this particular one, your assessments and units, this is around how do we speak to somebody who has been affected by domestic and family violence. So session 2 of 3. And let's do our acknowledgement to country. Have I got a learner who would like to read out our acknowledgement to country for our class tonight?
Can I volunteer?
Yeah, thank you.
In the spirit of reconciliation, Haida Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live, and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual, and cultural cost of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging.
Thank you so much for that. So a little bit of housekeeping. We say it each week, but it is really important as part of our self-care and the care amongst our peers. So cameras on if you can. It will help with your bandwidth if you've got it off, if you are struggling with some of your internet connection. But it's also self-care. So I like to know that who we've got in our room initially, but then of course I need you to manage. And I appreciate that some people may need to be off camera. But if you're going to be asking a question, could you just please put your hand up around participation if we're in that group. It is not an interruption. If you say, Vicky, can I just jump in here and say something? That's perfectly okay as well. So microphones on mute so we don't get any of that back sound. We will take breaks through that, but we've actually got quite a few videos to run through tonight. And there's so many different topics around it, like coercive control, domestic family violence. What is it? And then there's a great video in here tonight on boys will be boys. So I'm really mindful of when I put people into breakout rooms about our gender equity in that space. And so if I put people into a particular group, it will be because I've had consideration around how I would like that to be. Sometimes I do round robin, and then other times I will select peer for peer in that space as well, which is part of how we manage our respectful relationships. So be mindful that you're kind with your words, absolutely have an opinion. I love good discussion. However, we do that in a safe way. So safe storytelling is really important. And when we're in this space, we are coming in as learners, but we're also training to be youth workers, or we're training to go for another job or upskill ourselves. So the lens that we look through is always as a worker. Our personal opinions have a place, but that's not usually coming at it from a youth worker. And I like to set the tone for how we manage ourselves in that space. So at work, we are required to conduct ourselves within policies and procedures, the respectful language, how we manage ourselves. But I think it is good to unpack differing opinions, and I want us to do that very respectfully. No smoking or vaping on camera. I'm advising you about some trauma responses and any trigger warnings. If you find that, please go off camera straight away. If you need to step out of class, that also is okay. I want you to make sure that you're feeling safe and regulated in there. If there is something that is bothering you after class, please ring Lifeline 13 11 14 or 1300 Yarn for First Nation and Torres Strait Island people. Unpack anything, and debriefing is what we do as workers all the time. So you can have a lived experience and still work in the sector. We need to make sure that we look after ourselves when we're there, and be kind to yourself as well. So thank you everyone for joining, and let me just move that floating so we get a slightly better screen. Any questions before we dive into our PowerPoints? We all good? Give me a thumbs up if you're okay. And yeah, brilliant. Okay, thanks, Trent. Okay, we're not going to do that warm-up activity because I always get everyone to do self-reflection. So just an overview, we're going to understand the complexities of family violence. There are no two clients with the same story, even though we put them inside domestic family violence, because people have grown up with a different moral compass, a different family dynamics, lots of different complexities that sit around it. So we do our training around how do we engage, how do we support. That's foundational work, and that's what we do regardless. How we listen to someone's story is a skill set, and that's something that we need to be able to practice in our breakout room. That's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to unpack what are the key takeaways from that video where it talks about boys will be boys. It's delivered by a male, and it's a place of non-judgment as well, and it's a perspective that I can't give you because I don't identify with that gender. Do I mostly work with males? Yes, I do. The majority of the client group that I work with and have done for more than 20 years is that 17 to 19-year-old males. A lot of them have that experience around growing up in an environment where there was domestic and family violence around there. They often go from victim to offender, and that's because there's been no hope and healing and work being done. Often they will only come in front of a youth worker to get some of that counselling and support when they're in trouble, when they're being spotlighted, when there is something that's gone wrong and they don't know what to do with that. There's a lot of deep-rooted trauma that has not been dealt with, and so those young people have a lot of attachment issues or a lot of anger issues, or they're confused around that. A lot of 17-year-old males growing up in a single parent household where maybe the parent, the primary parent, has not re-partnered, and they have been the man of the house. And then when a new partner comes into that space, they're sacked. They're sacked from that job of being the man of the house, replaced by another man in the house. And a lot of parents will struggle because they've never thought about, well, how will I divide up if I repartner? Who's going to be guiding the kids? We rarely have these conversations. So you may work with a young person, but you may also do some other work around the family who are going, it's all behavioral and I don't know where it's coming from. We have to tread gently in that space for the families and carers also. Keep in mind that domestic family violence has different laws around it as far as state and territory go. So when you're doing your assessment work, it needs to be relevant for that as well. So, so we will see a lot of survivors of domestic family violence actually turning up in a court system for completely different reasons. But once that story is presented to a magistrate, they have an understanding that we're actually dealing with a complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which complex is when it happened when they were young and developing. And this is where that sits. It's actually really complex. What are we actually working with? We're working with that deep, deep trauma. So we work with the root cause when we're actually there. What happened to you? And we may not get there straight away if it's disengaged from school, if there's been outbursts, if they're smashing holes in walls, things like that, where the police are called, because nobody in the household has those skills to de-escalate a situation. And we're going to understand and identify the behaviours of what family violence is. And it can also be sibling to sibling, because that's what we've taught. So I will just go off recording here at not a problem, Kim.
Yeah, had a few issues with the actual subject matter at work today again, unfortunately. But anyway, yep.
Right. Well, you're in
good to join. Thank you.
safe storytelling space now. So catch your breath and be supported by your peers in our class. So with that particular video that we were watching and we weren't recording it, the group are going to head into a breakout room. For those of you who came in because of whatever's happening in your work-life balance, your peers will update you in that space when you jump into the room. However, you're going into a breakout room with specific work to do. The breakout room is for you to be able to decide what did you see with the guy that was doing the presentation? What did you hear with the content that he was discussing? And with the emphasis that language matters. So there's no right or wrong when you come out of this breakout room, but I want you to be able to debrief and discuss, what did you think of that? Some bits were good, some bits I didn't agree with. This is the bit that I found really interesting. But what I saw in him was a highly anxious presenter, very elevated, breathless. So I used my observation skills, clearly very passionate about this subject, knowledgeable about this subject, and stands up and shares that messaging. So I guess I'm thinking that was a room full of women, given the target group that he referred to. And that's a difficult thing for a male to get up and talk in front of a group of women. I wonder what that would have been like. Absolutely, Amy, just one sec. I wonder what that would be like if a female presented in front of a group of males. And that's a reflection that I want you to have a look at as I put you into groups. Amy, what would you like to add?
Adding on to that, he was really passionate about men and how they need to break their silence on domestic violence against women and children. Because I think, as he said, like, you know, if the more the men speak about it, the more it'll be heard, and the more like it'll educate other men to be more wary about domestic violence going on in the community.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. They'll take a leadership space, which can be flipped around if people who do have an understanding around healthy relationships with self and other people can actually model that behavior. So you might experience that one-on-one when someone comes in and speaks with you as a youth worker. You might see some young people in a space where they have that reaction, but we look at what happened to you when we're in that space, regardless of whatever they're presenting with. So the two questions that I want you to come back with, your view, no right or wrong, is what did you hear, like really hear? And what did you see when he presented as well? And for me, language matters. So I'm going to put everybody, I'm going to pause, and you're going to come back with did I do that? Oh. So everyone will join us again in about 1 minute. So I'm just putting up some notes for everybody. The group are going to come back and give us some key findings and takeaway. I'm talking, and in my notes in chat, and it's just a bit of a guide on who is doing the conversation. So as we bring everybody back into this space, we'll be looking through the lens of a youth worker. It may be the first time we've met this client. This is us observing a speaker, which we watched in the video, which we don't record, obviously. However, it is embedded, and you'll get that as an attachment when you get this class recording for those of you who aren't with us in real time. So as everybody starts coming back, just letting you know I'm recording at the moment, just for you to feel comfortable and how we're going in that space. So I've just left some notes as well. So in our breakout room, just recapping, we watched the video. We watched about men and violence. The unit is domestic family violence. So we had a male do a presentation, and that presentation was really interesting. We've got our youth worker lens on when we're in that space, but I'm really mindful that we all come in with our own lens over whatever it is that we hear and we see. We'll have our own style as youth workers also in that space. So what I would like is for the group, and I can see who's in which group, when we do our client file notes, we write factual, we write dot point findings, and we write, this is what I saw, this is what I heard, because that could be questioned. So if you're actually asked to speak to your file notes as part of a person that has to give a statement or give a statement to police or report to the police because you've been involved in reporting, or your file notes are going to be read and used in court, you may not be there. It will either be a make or a break to support whoever it is that is before the court. So as youth workers, always remember that what you write in your file note could help your client that you're working with, even if it's worker to worker. So the questions that I gave everyone when we went in, what did we observe, what did we see, and what did we hear? And that's around our language that gets used. So who would like to speak on behalf of room 2, which is all the guys on camera at the moment? Though I did throw a worker into your space of a different gender. So if we got a spokesperson from room 2.
So I don't remember which room I was
Amber,
in.
you were in room 1.
Okay, thank you.
So all the boys and Sky, all the males and Sky were room 2.
It was yeah, it was interesting listening because I didn't see the recording apart from the last couple of minutes, but I think the general gist was that the role modelling had to come from men. There was a question, well, what if it was a female presenting to a group of males? I don't think it would have the same impact. And I think that is the very answer to the question, well, what's going on? And is it role modelling? And if it is role modelling, then how can we reverse it? And that is by reversing the role modelling in the same way that it's presented. So if people are role modelled by men in leadership, they're being parents, elders, politicians, whatever, then that role modelling has to come back from those same people.
Okay, thank you, Kim. So that's a finding around, I'm just letting somebody in our group. So the feedback is around a different impact of different presenters, role models being positive. What did we see? Those who were watching that presenter, what did we see? What did you observe?
I'm afraid I can't answer that one, unfortunately. Sorry.
You spoke with urgency. I picked that up too, Kayla. And what does urgency look like?
Now. This needs to happen now. So there's time for action, and that is like right now.
Yeah. So it was a very action motivated. So he spoke with urgency. What did we see? It was now important action, forward posture, fast-paced speaking. Yeah, definitely. That says urgency, doesn't it? That's like I'm leaning towards you, asking for something as well. What did you hear? Was it a call to action?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Just telling people to stand up and take action.
Yeah. Sweating. That could have just been the venue, though. Yeah. It's good, but it's a good observation as well. Raw. Okay. It was. And I guess what we're doing is I'm just going to bring somebody in. So I guess what we're doing is we're making, we're sitting at a session, we're listening to somebody speak who clearly has knowledge about this and a message that they want to be able to share with others. But I felt it was a sense of urgency. I got that too, that vibe. He was very adamant to get his point across. Yeah, really good point, Amy. So I got that urgency in his language. I definitely did. What was an unexpected learning? Is there anything there that you hadn't heard before or hadn't heard before?
So when he was writing the sentences at the start, he kind of did it in a way that we know, but then he kind of backflipped and changed it from Mary and put it back onto the actual bloke. And then he's kind of like, instead of looking at women going, why was she dressed like that? Why was she drinking in a hotel with those blokes? So it's more like the actions of the blokes is what caused all this sort of thing. You know what I mean? We got to stop looking at the women and look at the people who are responsible.
It's a really important point. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I think I just muted you, Trent. Sorry about that. I was just chatting cutting down that chatter. I didn't mean that. That was a really good point around it. When we hear, if it comes out in the media, especially currently at the moment, because there's a lot of emphasis around it. So when we're talking about what happens with policing or what we're responding to, focus point of the statement. Yeah. So I think what we're looking at is what's trending. And it shouldn't be a trend conversation, but it's so complex as the why, what is going on in that space. We can't possibly know that. But when we're working as a worker, about 60% of the conversation is what the client says. And we are about 40%. And our 40% consists of non-verbal cues like the nodding, okay. And what I'm finding is in that feedback around how do I work with, especially in this space, how do I work with someone that comes in and talks about domestic family violence when the media are telling stories about people who have been killed by exes or intimate partners, and they have followed everything. They've done everything, gone to the police, done the reports and done things like that. And in a class where I had some questions around this, I went to trusted people for me and what I consider warriors because they are victim survivors. And I asked them, rather than it come from me, and I asked them, what was the most valuable thing for you when you first went for help? And what I got back from the people that I asked, was the information that they shared with me. And that was around being believed. That was the most powerful impact in a traumatic situation for a victim survivor. Still under threat. Both of the people that I spoke to still have pending court cases. And this is years beyond the initial I go and get help. So I've got permission to share one of those, and I wanted to be able to do that for you. So I will share that. Because I have their consent. So when we were in that space, the questions that I asked were, because it was a real struggle when we're talking about gender workers, like how can a male work with a female? How can a female work with a male who is a victim survivor in this space? I asked, would you mind if I ask you a question about domestic family violence supports when you first spoke to someone to get help? And because so little is done for victims, that was the motivation around it. And then how can we help when we are hearing that here are these people who have been murdered, who still went to police, still told friends, still had a domestic family violence protection order or a protection order, depending on what state and territory in. And so from one victim survivor, my counsellor made an appointment with a service provider when it got really bad. And they and a few other organisations knew about it, but I wasn't ready to leave until then. And so that worker ended up calling the victim survivor on her day off. So it obviously was sitting with that worker. I'm not going to leave this. So everything, all my training is going to jump in here. Ended up calling on her day off and said that it was time to actually help that victim survivor make that decision that they were unable to, because by the time you get to that state, you are so beaten down, lost your confidence. When you hear, nobody's going to believe you anyway, because the public image is the opposite to the private image. So you might hear those expressions of street angel, home devil. It's often applied to young people of school angel, home devil. But it's like in different scenarios, we present different ways. from there, and basically that service provider said they'll be there in 10 minutes. So there wasn't a lot of thinking, backing out, you know, I guess stuck making the decision. The decision was being made for them because they no longer had capacity and the risk was high, and a trained worker was aware of it, so much so that they called on their day off because that had been sitting with them, and they weren't prepared to leave it because of that risk that was still sitting there, and it just did not settle for that worker, and quite likely saved that survivor's life and the life of their 3 children. So from there, they said I couldn't go back to Child Protection Services, would need to take the kids. And so that was a really huge motivator as well, because often a victim survivor will do it for others and not for themselves. I tried to go back and get some things, and the offender came home, went at the survivor with garden shears. So it ended up just having the clothes on our backs that we left with. From there, I was with another service for 10 weeks in emergency crisis accommodation, and then on my own until the housing application came through, and they opened up the case for another week. Another time when Orange Door got involved was when there was a call, and apparently there'd been a threat made. So this was around the mediation service when you go in and talk. So a threat had been made to another service provider. So when we do that intake process, we say everything you say to me is private and confidential unless there is a risk to self or others. That's the action that happened. So the threat was made towards them, and through them, they told the survivor to meet them at the police station immediately with enough stuff for a week, and they were moved into a motel for safety. And then another service provider were also involved. This is the victim sharing from the heart. I don't really know how to answer my question. I had nothing in my name, as they controlled everything so that they could get help, get the kids in my name so I could get the family tax benefit, and I would be able to do it. That I'm not crazy was a really important messaging being told to the survivor. And first time I went to the food bank, I cried because there's a lot of shame, humiliation, because you hold a secret to keep this all together. You think you're doing it to save your family. And if you are just compliant, then hopefully it won't escalate into a full act, because you're always trying in that cycle to skip that escalation. And knowing that I could feed the kids was the most powerful. Some services haven't been as understanding, so some workers don't hear, respect, don't come out of non-judgment in that space. Knowing that they know me is good, so having that connection. Just before Easter, a few months after, I was walking past and a lady ran out with a heap of Easter eggs for the kids and helped me with presents when it was my son's birthday. So being connected was very, very important, I think. And then going on, I think the statistics of women killed by their partners and something had changed. It was a gut feeling that I knew it was time, or I wasn't going to be around for my kids, mixed with my counsellor realising it was getting to that point. When she called, I knew this was probably my only chance, but because it happened so quickly, I was so unprepared. I had $4 in my car, 68 cents in my bank account, 3 kids and the clothes on our back, and nothing to eat and nowhere to go. So I was really moved by these survivors sharing their story, and you could very well be the first person that they speak to. And this is not gender specific. This is a parent trying to protect their children and save the children's lives. So the children, all their lives, have been witness to. If you're staying in the family home, that is the scene of the crime. Every room has some yelling. Every room will have some hitting. Every room, even when the offender is gone, that is the imprint, that is the trauma bonding for the survivors of domestic and family violence. And when those young children start to grow, if that modeling isn't in place, if the therapy isn't there, often can become from victim to offender. So unexpected learning, focus point of the statement, and I'm sharing because I have permission and consent from that survivor. Is any of that new information for you though? Is that what you think domestic family violence actually is?
Can I just mention a bit of experience?
Sure, Kim.
It is, I don't know, it just seems to be a lot more complex. And it's empowerment normally of one person over another. And there just seems to be so many different things involved in it. But yeah, the end result is quite catastrophic. I don't know, I see a lot more focus needed to combat aggressive behaviour of one person to another. And it does seem to be predominantly male aggression. My other observations are the supports are probably not sufficient. For instance, I don't know how many IVOs just don't seem to be policed, or they breach and nothing happens. I see so many, the perpetrator is known to police. So in other words, there's been multiple attempts or breaches of very catastrophic behaviours for police to be involved. So why is this continuing?
It's a really important part of the discussion, Kim, as well, that is happening is if there is a protection order, how come people aren't protected under that order?
Yeah.
Who gets to decide if a breach is a breach is a breach? And so adding to that, Caleb?
Sorry, I just wanted some clarification. What do you mean by always a story unless there is a clinical diagnosis?
Okay, good question. So when we come to that space and you're in the court proceedings, it's about, does that person have capacity to understand and get workshop through this? Like we talk about role modeling, we talk about learning, unlearning certain things and doing things another way. If there's a clinical diagnosis, if someone is identified as a psychopath, then it's highly unlikely you could put them in a program and put them in front of role models and that you would expect to change behavior. So if there's a clinical diagnosis, so people will be referred and have a psychiatric assessment in that space. And that's about, do you have an understanding of what is right and wrong? Do you have an understanding around what is guilty and not guilty? Do you have an understanding that it's not okay to do what you did? And so someone can present highly functional, but behind the scenes, there is a lot of harm and damage, even when the offender has left the property and considered to be safe because that protection order is in place. So the courts might rule that it would be unlikely for that person to be rehabilitated and learn another way. So we might, as workers, have a couple come in and the one partner might be going, oh, look, I didn't hit him, you know, but abuse can be verbal. And abuse can be emotional. It can be psychological. It can be financial. It can be spiritual. So it's not always about hitting. That is the absolute extreme of that. But it wouldn't matter. There are some who you could never put them into a program and rehabilitate them on how to have a healthy relationship. It is outside of their mental capacity to be able to do that. It's unusual, less than 4% in the courts, Caleb, but it's something we need to know. We can't assess that. We can't make that decision. The extreme ones, the ones who kill, are usually part of that 4%. So that's why when we were talking about it, with a lot of the guys that are in our class group, because I am really mindful that the focus is on males in this space, but there's a lot of really great role modeling that is happening, and you need to hear the successes of survivors and the difference that you can make in this space. So the media will talk about the extreme, that less than 4%, and that really is statistic. So we're hearing 31 women have been killed in Australia so far this year, and that may have gone up even from the last time I looked over the weekend. And there's femicide data that comes through, that there's a lot of injured people, and there's a lot of male victim survivors as well. There's a lot of children who have grown up around that and have been targeted by those offenders. And then those children, as they grow, and they may be the ones that present to us as youth workers, who will find themselves turning from victim to offender, because even though the person that harmed them most of all, that is the approval that they're seeking. And when they start to, when you've got that less than 4% of person who has a clinical diagnosis or not yet diagnosed, when they start working on that young person, that is to continue to harm the primary person that they want to abuse, and they will take that child who is the most vulnerable and they will use that against that other adult that they were in a relationship with. So the children become collateral damage, and these are the young people that we'll be working with. So when I say what happened to you, that's the space we need to come at. So we've got to get that story, and they won't give it to us unless they trust us in that space. So he's talking about what it looks like, the optics, what do we hear and what do we see? And we're talking about what happened to you. And they will only do that if they feel comfortable and trust you. And so some men will refuse assessments, but when it comes to family court, around custody, there is absolutely no refusal. You'll be in contempt of court if you don't submit to that. So now there's parity in that space. Both parents can get legal aid. The legal aid is $68,500 to go to family court. So it used to be inequity that sits around that, and that is family court is around the right for the children to have a relationship with both parents if it is safe to do so. So our file notes may be applied. And like I said, it's less than 4% of no contact, but that does happen, and they are the ones who will do anything, even if it hasn't made it to court and they think they're going to lose it and the heat is on. This is what you're seeing, is that extreme violent behavior. So they may have been charged, they could be on parole and still continue to breach. Not normally, and 96% of the time that will actually work. But I take Kim's point, very important, that if there is a breach, why is it that the police make that decision on the ground rather than gather the evidence and let the magistrate hear that in court on behalf of the victim survivors? And it does not happen like that. They will go, is it in the public interest? Absolutely it is. Public are aware. Is this enough evidence? It's like he said, she said kind of conversation. The police are not equipped to be able to do that. If you live in a regional remote area where everybody knows everybody, then it's likely that that police may even know the offender. And some of the worst cases, those offenders have police attending their place of business or hanging out with those police. So that's why in Queensland, they had a commission of inquiry around domestic family violence because of the police who did not respond. And here are the victim survivors going and doing everything they're supposed to. So those questions that I got from were from men in doing Cert IV, asking these questions in youth work. And they just wanted to know, if I've got a female that comes in and we're talking about this, how can I authentically believe that I'm going to help when I know the optics aren't good? What people are seeing, what they're hearing, it's actually quite dangerous. But I want to let you know in this space, and for women who are also, is making sure that you are responsive in it. And when you do your role play, this will be about how do you engage? What's your active listening like? What language? What's your body language doing, even when you're not talking, and getting them to talk about it? It's like, what is the most important thing right now? So usually someone will present with, I need accommodation. I cannot stay at home. We're dealing with those things, the priority of needs. That's where we need to do our work. So the police leave it for the victim to collect and submit evidence, which is being shared with me at the moment. Absolutely 100%. Victims end up finding all of the evidence to be able to do that. So it can be really challenging as to why are we still doing this? And Kim raised it, why are we still doing? Why are the police saying, when I come back in on roster, I've got 40 domestic family violence complaints sitting on my desk? And my answer to that is, maybe you should have dealt with it the first time it turned up. Maybe you wouldn't be having these repeat offenders coming back through this. They're in a cycle of unhealthy relationship, and they need to be able to learn another way. So if a breach reported required mandatory counselling and reporting, and their attendance, otherwise remand until the court date. But a lot of police will just go, oh, well, we're here and we're settling it down. We're here to de-escalate. Okay, everyone fine. Look, if you've got somewhere to stay for a couple of nights, that kind of thing. They'll even put an order on, but that's a piece of paper. If you've got a serious violent offender, that piece of paper means nothing, because what they think they're losing is far greater than anything anybody could say. So the safety and well-being of those most vulnerable is what we've got to do. So you might jump into that space. That story that I was given consent to share, as a worker, you might be making that decision and taking that away. So it's time for us to have a break. I want us to just take 5 minutes here. I'm not going anywhere. I just want to hit pause. We'll come back in and debrief. And when you come back in, I would like you to just drop in, what is your number? What's your check-in number after this topic? Just so I can do a little bit of check on how everyone's traveling. So I'll just hit pause in my recording. Thank you so much, everybody, for the insight. It's a really complex conversation. So I will share, and it's good to have a check-in with everybody. I really appreciate how you are coping in that space. I am going to share this and hope that I don't move. Okay, we did our breakout room, which is fabulous. So I'm just going to show our video, and we are recording again. And a lot of this really is about our own lens that we have over this space, and our own lived experience, where some of us may or may not have grown up around this, and then what our views are around that. Is it something that we can help somebody recover and be able to have a healthy relationship with self and others? Absolutely, 100%. Absolutely. And we don't hear enough about the successes and the work, the difference that someone makes. Is there's another way to manage. But when we're working with young people, they don't have that 7 seconds pause. So there's an expression that's like count to 10. We talk about our breath work and bringing everyone in. And one of our guys from last night mentioned that they were watching a footy game, an NRL game on the weekend. And when they all came together in a circle, they did the exact same breath work that we actually work with in class, which is 2 hands over our diaphragm like this, pressing in just at the top of our rib cage, where we breathe in for the count of 4 and hold for the count of 4, and breathe out through our nose again for the count of 4. So if we find that we've got a client that is dysregulated or heightened or very stressed, this is something that we can teach them to do. But if we are, and we've just had back-to-back stories and caring for ourselves in that space, and also if we don't deal with it, it can impact how we work as a worker. And this stuff is layer upon layer upon layer. So even if it's not happening to you, we work with vicarious trauma. And so that means safe storytelling, debriefing, checking in, number 1 to 10, how am I traveling, self-reflection in this space, really important. So we did our breakout room activity and we brought that back. Let's have a quick look around what coercive control is, and I cannot record that because that's actually a copyright thing. So I will just hit record. Great. So when you are working with domestic family violence and you're doing your assessment work, and one of those things that want you to do is to do a brochure around domestic family violence, you need to be able to do a bit of research around it as well. So with that research is what is available in your local area. So if you look up a place like Edon Place, one of the struggles for a lot of victim survivors is that they can get that support, but their funding requires them to take that matter to the courts. Now, a lot of people aren't ready for that, but that is a condition of stay. So if they don't, then it means that they're looking for different types of emergency accommodation. It's always about dignity of risk. But if there's children involved, you as a worker may be required to report. So that's your mandatory reporting requirement, because the children are the most vulnerable. If that parent is not able to protect themselves, then they're unlikely to be able to protect their children. And these are the things that you're going to be faced when you're dealing with this as a worker. And our role plays in these particular units sits around this. So Edon Place talks about services. Even when you jump in, you can get off that website really quickly if you're a victim survivor. I encourage you, now that is a space for women who have been impacted by domestic family violence and children. However, now they have male workers in there. Now that never happened once before, but now they're working with how can we help the men who are often from victim to offender, and they'll have males who will go to court and support people as well. So what I would like you to do is, just for the point of this exercise, I'm going to pop you into breakout rooms again. And I want you to just go to that website. If you've got it on a phone or you can do it on your device, I want you to go to Edon Place and just have a look at that. Let me just do a quick Edon Place, which is a Bundaberg one. Around that, and I want to copy that link. Okay, great. So I'm going to drop that link in there for you. Oh, that looks really weird. Right, so that may get you in or it may not get you in. So, but if you put in Edon Place, it's Bundaberg, which is Queensland, which is where I'm based. I've got knowledge around that, but somewhere in your state, somewhere in your postcode, you will also have a service. But for the point of looking for research, this is an amazing service. The two people that we just saw in that video, one was the police commissioner, commission of police, no longer in that role, and even the Attorney General has changed. So this is actually a couple of years ago. Coercive control is almost to go before government. So it can take 2 or 3 years before that happens. And usually laws only change to give more powers to people when there has been a murder of a particular type. So it just depends on the appetite of the government and what the public opinion is around that. There's a lot of conversations around men won't go and get help because they feel no one will believe them. And that would be, we don't have the data on male victim survivors because a lot of them don't report, but it absolutely, definitely does happen. and a lot of young people that we have coming through are in that space. So what I would like you to do is to have a look on that site, and there's a link into having a look at their brochure. Okay. And that's one of your assessment pieces. And what I want you to do is to just spend time with somebody about what you think would be, thanks, Caleb, what you think would be good information to put into a brochure as part of your assessment work as well. So we're just going to spend 5 minutes in that breakout room, and then everybody's going to come back. I'm going to recreate. I'm going to sign automatically. And I'm putting 2 or 3 people into each room. So just for 5 minutes, look that up, come back with what do you think are the most important messages to put in your brochure. And I will wait for everybody to come back and join us, but I would like to get feedback. Sorry, let me just.
We're back.
I think we're right. Just some feedback on with this particular part of your unit assessment, it is information and education is what a brochure is. So if it, on average, it takes 7 times for a victim to leave a domestic family violence relationship and a situation, what can we send them home with? Because often these issues and the incidents will happen after hours when you are not there. Absolutely, Amy, please share.
So we talked about the information you can send to a person is like different the contact details where they can contact you on after hours. And if they're not able to get in touch with you, like different services they can get in touch with that provide the same like needs that the person, you know. Yeah.
It's great. Thank you. And that's from your group? Who you
Yeah, that was from me and Grace. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let me just make sure everyone's okay. I'm in that space. All right. So in having said that, thank you, Amy. You're right. When an incident happens, it's not usually 9 to 5, not usually Monday to Friday, that these things can happen outside of those hours. Caleb.
The biggest thing I noticed on the brochure that I wasn't actually expecting to see, besides, because I was expecting all the resources to be there, but they stated the signs of abuse and what to look out for, which I think is an excellent idea to have on the brochure, especially if it's someone who isn't sure yet. It is something that they can, once they have that in their head, it's something they can process later.
I like that pickup as well, because what if they're not quite sure if it is that? And do you think it would inform and educate somebody if that was actually what was happening for them if they weren't quite sure?
Yeah, I think it's just, sometimes it's just, obviously if they are worried that it is something like that, like quite often it is the small things that sort of add up. It's the, oh, he's only angry when he's drunk, or this and that, like those things add up. And I think that's what they need to be looking at those and going, okay, this is abuse. This isn't just a bad afternoon. This isn't just a bad Thursday kind of thing. This is abuse and I need to leave. That is the hardest part in the situation, is like they don't see them as a abuser. They see them as someone who's made a mistake quite a lot of the time.
Yeah. And if you were a good partner, then you would be forgiving. Or, you know, what about when someone's struggling, if someone's unemployed, or if someone's got something else that's going on? But it's really about getting help. And if we haven't got those skills, even if we did, would we be the right person to be doing that work if we're actually part of that that language, that relationship that's sitting in there. So there will be conversations where people might say, oh, someone would only have to hit me once and I'd be gone. If it was that simple, then a lot of people would be gone, but that's not how it works. So it's far more complex than that. It is about how Kim shared about power and control, and that person being fearful of not having power and control and influencing. So now I'm going to put everybody into a breakout room, and I want you to do an intake and an assessment and a practice run. Okay, so I'm going to give you a scenario that a person presents. They are female. They are well dressed. And they have been watching TV. And think they may be in a domestic family violence situation. Okay, that's your scenario. This is also one of our work that we do in our tasks. So your client, one of you will play the client and one of you will play the worker. So you're presenting just knowing that you've had a look at your brochure, and it's about information, education, awareness. You're not trying to do anything other than just active listening. Okay, so this may feel a little foreign, but it's in a breakout room. No one's recording you. Nobody's judging you. You're both in exactly the same position, and I'm putting you in rooms with two. So it's just you and a worker. Okay, and it doesn't matter which one of you do. I'm not going to put you on the spotlight when you return. What I am going to do is, what did you find most helpful for the person who is in receipt of that? What were the skills that were most valuable? Thank you. I just want you to practice your active listening skills. So who would like to jump in, and I'll just demonstrate that for you now while we're still in this space together, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. Who would like me? Yeah. Okay, thanks, Rochelle. Is there someone who would like to be, Caleb, would you like to be the worker, or would you like to be the client?
I think I'd like to see
Yeah.
how you would play the client, actually.
Sure. Okay, great. Happy to. All right, so we're in this space. Are you comfortable that this is part of our recording for our remote learners and that as well?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, terrific. All right. So, okay, so I've arrived. I filled in all the paperwork at the front desk, and I've just been shown this is my worker. So Caleb is my worker, and my name is, for the point of this role play, my name is Vicky. All right, that's easier. Okay, hello.
Hi, Vicky.
How are you?
I'm all right. So, how are you doing today?
I'm not sure. Somebody told me that if I came here, you might be able to help me. I've got a couple of problems I wanted to talk to somebody about.
Yep. And then we would obviously go over the confidentiality agreement and whatnot. So obviously this is all recorded for the sake of this. I won't take this to anyone else. No one else will. So I've forgotten all the thing.
I'm giving my consent to go
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
great.
and then so what do you think's happening that is an issue for you?
I don't know, Caleb. Well, my husband's under a lot of pressure at work, and he thinks he's going to lose his job. And just lately, any little thing sets him off. I don't know. Normally, he's really quiet and doesn't say a lot, but just he started to have a few drinks after work. He never used to do that. He seems really stressed. And he started yelling at the kids. And the other night, he put his fist through a wall at home. And that is just not what he is like normally. And it's been really frightening and frightening the kids as well. And there's been some yelling, and I have been yelling as well. So it's not just him, it's me as well. And I just don't know. My friend said that I should come and talk to somebody about this.
Yeah. So I would at this point refer them to some, like a pamphlet, like you've just said. I would give them so they have some resources to reach out to. And then have you got anywhere else to stay in case of an emergency? Have you got anyone else that you can help?
Well, I do have a sister who is a couple of hours drive away, and we've got kids the same age. Sometimes I can go there like for a holiday or whatever. Like, are you thinking we should all go or just me and the kids?
Just you and the kids, I would say. It would be I would say if things are too stressful and you can get out of that situation, it may be the best course of action. And then
Should I call the police or should I just go, do you think?
I think it would be best to make a police report.
Yeah.
And then leave. Yeah.
I don't want
Sorry,
him
I'm a bit unsure of what I'm supposed to.
I don't want him
Yep.
to get into trouble. Like, I understand his problems. I don't want him to get into trouble. I mean, that'll look really bad. We've got, we go to church. There's a lot of people who will know about it. That just doesn't seem very respectful. Like, I do understand why he's under pressure, but we're very frightened. But I could go to my sister's. Yeah, okay. And that brochure, okay, so you've got a lot of phone numbers here. So would I call them if I was stuck as well? Would they help me with the police report maybe?
Potentially, I'm not sure what resources were on that pamphlet in terms of the resources that were provided, but there would be resources for finding temporary accommodation and potentially financial aid and food. But yes, it just needs to be like what Mel has said there. It's something that needs to be on the record. If he's made the decision to do that, it shouldn't be against the well-being of you and your family. And if things progress further, it will be a situation in which they won't necessarily be able to intervene if there wasn't a previous record of it happening.
Okay. Well, thank you, Caleb. Well, look, I'll take the brochure and I'll have a read about it. And I'll have a bit of a think about it. I'm glad I came in and spoke to you though. Thank you. Okay, so thanks, Caleb. That was good. I felt heard. I'm just I'm thinking, sorry. Yeah, so I'm hearing some good feedback in our chat as well. So once you're settled at your sister's house, it might be more comfortable private to make the police report there. So timing is important, especially especially since it's in the next town over. So there's a bit of safety in that. This change of location could provide a sense of privacy and a stronger connection to the community. That's really valuable as well. So we've got some extra around, Rochelle's saying a surprise with the opening hours being Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 5 p.m. because as I mentioned, DV can happen anytime, but relieved to see that there are other supports after hours. I think it's really important that we would do that. So let me just bring in some people, admit, and then also admit. So just sometimes people get bumped out. So I'm bringing everybody back into this space. I'll just around that. So with the presentation of how someone appears, it's really important in the scenario. It's a well-dressed woman comes in and the worker is actually doing it the opposite way to how it needs to be done. So in that space, it's about making a judgment call based on appearance. However, can this happen to anybody and everybody, or is this only people who haven't got jobs or people who are that lower socioeconomic where they don't have a lot of disposable income? Does this happen to certain suburbs, or who do you think that domestic family violence happens to? And that's part of your research, is your demographics, is it can happen to anyone. But just because somebody presents well, and a lot of people will go, there's a lot of shame because there's a secret around that. So I'm going to put you into groups of 2, and I want one person to be the person that presents. It can be your own scenario. You can go, look, I'm going to be a young person that comes in, talks to a worker, and I'm just sharing my views about it's driving me crazy. My parents are arguing all the time. I don't think I can stay there. It can be that. That's who I presented for Caleb, and I want you to come up with your own scenarios. So if you feel comfortable and it's about a young person talking and sharing and I don't know what to do, then talk about that. Okay, so I'll pop you into your breakout room. It will just be 10 minutes, and if you've got time, then please make sure that you swap spaces. One person be the client, one person be the other. Okay, let me drop you into a breakout room. I'm going to recreate. I'm going to make 8 breakout rooms. I'm going to assign manually. Okay, so let me see. I'm going to assign okay. Getting there, people. And I need add one more room. I'm going to assign. Perfect. So I think I've given everyone a room. Please accept your invitation. And we'll come back. Have I put everybody into a room? Open all rooms. Great. 10 minutes, everyone, and we'll come back to this space. I'm just moving people into, yeah. Sorry, Addie, I'm putting you. Did you want to stay in with me? All right, I can put you in. I'll put you in a room of 3. Just give me one moment. Just got to find your tribe for you. Sorry, just I've just got a couple of people who I'm going to move you over to room 4. I'm moving you into room 4, Addie. That's great. I think I've got everybody in somewhere. Have I got anyone who's sitting in the wait room, just not sure? Martha, I need to put you in a spot and feel good about that. Emma, great. So we're back, and for those of our learners who watch in remote, everybody has just jumped into let's take the role of client and worker, and I'm going to put it out to the group to be able to just let me know how that went. So who would like to start our discussion with how that went for you? Tell me what the scenario was as well. And what you went with, and were you the worker and the client, and let me know what that experience was like using your active listening skills, your nonverbal communication, information and awareness, and then I'll come back to this, when do we report, how do we report? So who'd like to start? Nobody wants to start. Caleb, thank you.
Someone's got to take the lead.
You do.
So I obviously went for the opposite one with the start of the activity, because I did the worker with you. And I think one of the things I noticed when I was the client was the actual words that were being used, like the terms. So when we were going through it, I felt like it very much matters when you're in that sort of vulnerable situation where you're coming out and you're trying to figure yourself out. It's the I think, because obviously I was working with Trent. I hope you don't mind if I call you out, Trent. Is that okay? Yeah, cool. So he did the confidentiality agreement, and when he finished that, he said, "Is that clear?" And that seems like would very much matter with the wording you'd use at the end of that. Like, especially in someone in that state. I don't know why that just sort of clicked to me. But even when it comes to like very specific like legal requirements, you still need to maintain a level of compassion in what you're saying. We sort of got the wording down for when I went back to being the worker. I think I got the wording correct, but then I was almost too robotic in the manner of what I was saying.
Yeah. So do you think that would flow with a bit more practice?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And I'm watching Trent nod, and you're getting peer feedback. So that's great. So so role play is a practice area for us before we go into placement, before we work, or to strengthen our skills and support others. I think it's really important, Caleb, thanks for sharing, is that the empathy, when we put ourselves in the client's chair, like what might that sound like? How does that feel when I'm actually putting myself in that space? When we're doing role play, that's exactly what we're doing, trying it on. And it feels different, doesn't it? When you're consciously jumping in. The core skills delivered sensitively, so still about the privacy, confidentiality, consent, because it's very important that a person knows that if you say something, it may end up being reported, might be to line manager, supervisor, police, or others around the wellbeing, depending on the scenario. Can I just ask briefly, what was your scenario? What did you present with?
I think I just went with very similar to what you had. I said, so when I was the client, I stated that I was a girl, I came in, my partner hadn't done anything yet, but he had put some holes in some walls. And was drinking in the afternoons, and I was just upsetting him much too easily.
Okay, thank you. That's really important. So client shared there was alcohol, so there were external things going on and easily triggered. Would you have put that at a high, medium, or low risk?
I would say medium to high risk.
Yep, could escalate. Yep. Okay, very good. Thank you. Good assessment work. Anybody else like to share? Addie, I popped you in somewhere. Who are you with? I just haven't got sound yet. Sorry. Don't want to put you on the spot.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, can.
Yeah, I was with Caleb and Trent.
Okay. All right. Great. So what role did you have a role, or were you observer?
I just quickly done a worker's role.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So did Caleb stay the client all the way through?
No, Trent. It was me and Trent.
Okay, great. So tell me what you found from the worker's perspective, Addie. How do you think that went? If we're going to use our self-reflection, how do you think you went in that space?
Pretty bad.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh,
well, maybe who can tell us that? Can we get feedback from Trent?
It's a very daunting task, really, because
yeah.
we've never really been in that position before.
Okay.
But yeah, he did good. I think we all kind of did good. We had a go, and that's all that we had to do.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Okay. And Trent, did you feel that Addie heard you, listened, and believed you?
Yeah.
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 Great.
I had a
Okay.
pretty far out there kind of thing, so
No.
he dealt with it pretty good.
That's
Sure, bro.
If we come back to that, that was the most important message that victim survivors said, was to be believed and validated in that space. So that's great. So,
Okay.
So that's still good. Your energy that you take into that place, Addie, that's what's important. Not so much the words and being stuck, am I saying the right things? It's just be present.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah. There's no
Thank
perfect
you.
word. Good work. Have I got anyone from another group who would like to share the scenario they went with and what they were thinking that went like for them? I've got some people. I've got a lot of people here. Have I got any from any other group? Can we hear from a different gender, perhaps? The guys are really taking lead tonight. Okay, so I'll give feedback because I sat in my session with Caleb. So what I liked about my session with Caleb was that he was respectful and non-judgmental. I got that energy from that conversation. I was aware that this was an unusual scenario, it wasn't real, but I could tell that Caleb was really thinking about what might be the most helpful thing to say next. And that intention is what actually came through in that time that I spent with you, Caleb. So I liked how you were searching for information to help, and that your energy that you brought into that space was primarily respect. And I did feel that you believed me and you were there to help me. And I felt that if I came back with my brochure or I needed to do something, I felt that I would be welcome to come back and have another conversation with you. And I think that's really important. Sometimes it's not, here's a problem and I've got to fix it. It's about just knowing that I can go back to that same space and maybe talk to a worker who's helping me with just the decisions that only I can make. Although when I was sharing someone's story with consent that I had, that was about someone else taking charge. But if that person had been in front of me and maybe I had been back and spoken to Caleb and things were escalating and we'd spoken on several occasions, Caleb might ask that question and go, the next step is, do you think it's time? And I've moved you from medium to high risk. And I really think now that plan that you had to go to your sisters, that might be the time that we implement that plan. So we have things like a plan, which was really important. We have things like a go bag. That's part of a plan. So what can you put in a hurry? Otherwise, you're just leaving with the clothes on your back. So a go bag is really important. Sometimes that go bag is actually left at the place where you're going to go for emergency relief. Just if I get out, I know I've got a go bag already sitting there waiting for me, which is things like underwear and stuff like that, that people just don't have a change of. Some of those things, and putting a go bag together is part of that plan. So the important part is to have a plan. If it goes like this, what will I do next? That is a safety measure. The moment somebody leaves, the risk increases sevenfold. So they are at greater risk because they've left. The moment it goes to court, greater risk again. Or if there's a protection order being put in place, greater risk again, because it is no longer a secret. Then it comes out public information, even though domestic family violence court is not publicised. The only time that you will ever hear about that is if they've been charged criminally. So domestic family violence is a civil matter, not a criminal matter. It's when the breach happens that it becomes a criminal matter. But the police are reluctant, for whatever reason, to fully investigate and take that matter before the court, where it will be dealt with as a criminal charge. So who makes that decision on the ground? Usually unskilled people. And they're trying to, like Shannon Fenneman is talking about, all right, so we're going to bring in coercive control and we're going to have the police trained more. But it is Queensland Police that did the commission of inquiry around police not investigating, not taking action, making those decisions, you know, like, oh, well, if you've got somewhere to stay for a couple of nights and, you know, till things cool down. That was the other part of it as well. So I hope I'm not speaking too quickly for anybody who's just doing that language side of things. Please play this recording back at a slower speed if you are. So what have we got here? Let me just see if I have got a document. I'm just going to see if I can find that there. So when we went into that space, Edon Place had a referral form. Did anybody see that in the link that we went into? I will send everyone off on just just this exercise for right now, if you've still got access to that, just jump in and have a look at the referral form. So as you open up the web page, the referral form actually takes you to a download. You don't have to download it, but you can open it up. The kind of things that they're going to ask you for information will be the name, date of birth, address, and contact details. That's the initial, okay. Consent to be able to share, that can be done verbally, and you'll put that in your file notes, or written. So it's not about sitting there and going to everybody, oh gosh, you know, I've got to fill in all these forms. Be present, listen to what they're saying, and just say, look, I've got to make some notes. Some of this is consent. Is that where we're up to today? But getting their name and their contact details, and is this a safe number that I can call? So that you are safe to be able to answer that. Is a text message okay? So you'll notice on Need on Place on their webpage, like a lot of domestic family violence services, you can get out of that webpage quickly and there is no trace that you've been in there. That is deliberately designed so that people can find out that. And if someone is monitoring, so coercive control is about monitoring your phone, monitoring your finances, and in that. So that's okay, Kim, welcome back. So you might go, look, I got verbal consent, and then at some later stage. So if we're doing a referral over to another agency, it could be the type of thing would be emergency accommodation. It could be getting food, clothing. It could be about getting security attached to that. It could be about you going to court if you are part of that in the service where you're working. So if we go back to what's the most important, it is to be believed, because that person is in that state of submission, because like Kim rightly said, this is about power and control. For that person to remain safe, they often will be submissive. So if I don't say anything, if I say the wrong thing or I do the wrong thing or I look the wrong way, that might set that person off. So they've learned to do those protective behaviors. So have the children. So when we've got young people who grow up in an environment like that, who may come before us, it will be that the young person who may have been abused by the offending parent will be not so much turning against the parent, but it's likely they will blame themselves. And the person's acceptance that they want will often be the offender. And it can be very confusing because a lot of parents don't know how to have those conversations away from their children. So even child safety will, if a parent continues to talk about the other parent in a manner that re-traumatizes or trauma bonds that child or that young person as they're growing up, it's actually considered a form of abuse. So even the victim survivor, no matter what happened to them, cannot have those conversations around children who are minors, who don't have the maturity or the skills to be able to hear that conversation. So you might hear about things like parental alienation. Is that a term that anyone has kind of heard in the language at all? Okay, so parental alienation is about maybe playing one parent against the other and possibly using the children to take sides, or turning them against another person to lay that blame. A child, that is considered a form of child abuse. So if that child goes to school, or that child goes, that's it, I've had enough, I can't live here anymore, they are overwhelmed with those conversations. They have no control over. Automatically, the parents have it. So have child safety removed people from a victim survivor? Absolutely, 100% they have, because they refuse to keep that child or those children in a safe environment. They are re-traumatizing, psychologically injuring a child, because even though the offender has left, they are still living it, talking about it, not protecting the children. If you are the primary carer, you must keep your children safe, and that is language, environment. So having a couple of people over talking about and bashing the other parent verbally is considered a form of abuse in front of young children. And there's a point where they go, I'm out of here. 15, I'm out of here. If someone reparents and brings in another person in that space, and that other person starts to parent that young person without any of that healing, that then that acting out is often what will bring that young person in front of you as a youth worker. You know, like, oh, there's too much conflict, I've got to make a choice. So here's a young person made redundant because they were, especially young boys, 17 to 19 years of age. You're sacked. You're sacked from being the man of the house. That was the job. You're my big boy. And that could happen from the age of 7 all the way through. And as things start to get better down, and that parent starts to find their feet and go back to work and do those things, it's a very confusing time for young males in that space. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that's absolutely deep work that happens there. Cannot happen just in one. So when someone presents for us, someone's just sharing, and thank you. When that happens for us, Caleb's looking at giving me information. That's all I was ready for. So he fully understood. That's where he would go. Have you got a plan? And it was all around my safety, all around risk management. Even though we were in a role play, the messaging still got through. I wanted to know, what would I do? Who could I go to? What is open and an option for me? Please don't start doing that. Oh, did I say it the right way or whatever? Just bringing your energy into that space will be the most powerful. Believing that person, that will be what makes a difference. There's never any right words in there other than the I believe you. There is no judgment. Here is some information. If that is something, is now the time? Are you thinking that you would like me to help you with that plan right now? That's really all we're there for. We don't have to come up with the right word at the right time. It's just be there, be fully present, believe that person, and assess the risk. Like, this is seeming like it is escalating. Would you say that this is happening more frequently? That's an intentional interviewing question. You're trying to assess the risk, though. How do we do that? We do that by using open-ended questions. So as we're wrapping up, I want to give you what those open-ended questions are. They are any of the questions that start with who, what, how, when. Sorry, who else knows? Who, what, how, when, where, and why. They're our open-ended questions. Okay. Thanks, Mel. That's great. So who is this about? You, the children. I've got to capture all that information as a worker. What is it that's happening for you at the moment? How frequently is that happening? I'm assessing risk. Okay. When are you ready? Is this the timing right for you? Here is some information. If that changes, that's all you're doing. You're handing it back to that person, that dignity of the risk. You cannot do exactly what they're experiencing, take over and take power and control, unless you assess them as at risk to self or others, unable to make that decision because they are absolutely at such a low point that they're stuck and they don't know what would be the right decision. But if there's children involved, someone has to step in and report and take action. So I would say when we were having that story shared about the worker did that on their day off, they would have checked in with their line manager. Look, this is on my mind. What do you think I could do? And they would have had permission to make that contact, even though it was on their day off. Anything can't be answered. Yeah, anything that can't be answered with a yes or a no. There are times, thanks Mel, there are times where we need a yes or no. Are you ready? That's a yes. Are you ready? No, not yet. Or I'm not sure. Okay. What other information? There goes back to our open-ended question. What other things would you need to have in place to feel more confident about that? We're going to use an open-ended question. If they're not sure, I don't know, is there anything more that I could give you today to help you? No, I think I've got that. So we're just like, you know, what else could I give you today with our session? Because likely they're just formulating a plan. You may never know whether they execute that plan or not, but we may only ever see them once. And what can we do in that time is believe, be fully present, and make sure we give them the information, or we take action on whatever it is they say that they're actually ready for. So can I open that up to any other questions? Does that make sense for everybody in this space? This is pretty hard going, I know. It's not an easy topic to cover, but if you go back to your core skills, active listening, non-judgmental, doing your privacy and confidentiality, about safety and making sure that we've got consent, and that consent is informed consent, giving them all the information that we possibly can. And if that's in a brochure, then they can take that away with them in a safe way. Or we can point them to a website where it's safe for them. You can say, here's an app, here's one, but there's lots of others. And even in Eat On Place, which might be in a regional place in Queensland, which is nowhere near where they are, it has all those after hours free call numbers that are available nationally. So when you do your brochure, these are the kind of things, or your PowerPoint, these are the things that you would need to do. What would be the most helpful? What is abuse? Who could I call? Even if you put it in under this, who, what, how, when, where, and why, if you've got all of those questions answered in your brochure, that is what informed consent is. When we're talking to our clients, that is what informed consent will be. And when you write a document for a task, have I answered those questions? Is this about in my role play? Do they know who it is? Do they know what is happening for this person? Do they know how I'm going to be able to assist them today? That individual plan for them. Do I know when I'm going to be acting on that plan? And do I know why? Because they presented with low, medium, high risk, could be escalating. So that is our core foundational skills when we're working, regardless of whatever the issue might be that's presenting. And it's quite complex in that space. Okay, so the rest of my session is going to be recorded, and I'll pause our recording now. Great. Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm just putting up the final part of our work that we're working with in our PowerPoint slides. We've had some really amazing discussions tonight around how do we do that intentional interviewing, what is domestic and family violence, how we can help our clients with the information that they need, how we can prioritise the needs that they have, and where they may be up to. We've also talked about what are the types of services that are out there for people who are experiencing living with domestic family violence. And we've even had a look tonight at what might be some of those social issues that people face. So we know exactly what domestic family violence is, that it's complex, and what it looks like, and now what to do. So where do we go from here about being a worker in that space? So identifying the client needs, and we do that with interpersonal skills. And we did a lot of work tonight on that in the breakout rooms, but the breakout rooms also had everybody who was in class tonight come back with what the key takeaways were. And then we did some debriefing, how we were traveling ourselves, some self-reflection where we do our check-in number 1 to 10. And that is like, I'm feeling a bit rattled, or this is a topic that could be a bit close to the heart for me, or this is something that I don't really know a lot about. I haven't got a lot of experience and I'm still in that learning curious mode. So we also talked about how we can get that information off the internet, and I gave the name of a domestic family violence organisation, but you may have one in your state, territory or postcode. I want you to have a look at your learner's guide where it talks about those communication skills. So active listening, and that is all the non-verbal as well, like our nodding, our verbal cues, like, okay. And just being believed in that space, the most important thing that every victim survivor has come back with. Maintaining the confidentiality, making sure that when we get the name and the contact phone numbers, that we're not calling a house where there could be someone there, placing someone at greater risk. That's very important. And then asking direct questions in a sensitive and appropriate way. So it's like, is now the time? Do you feel unsafe? It's okay to ask those questions. We can think it, but we're in that role as a worker and we need to be able to assess the risk and help that person if they are ready for that help and support. If there are children involved, we absolutely have a requirement to report. How we do that is with following our policies and procedures that the organisation has in place. And then using open-ended questions. So I covered that a fair bit tonight in that who, what, how, when, where, and why. And an open-ended question is the kind of question that isn't just a yes or a no answer. Now, there are times where we do need a yes or a no. Would you say you are ready to get that support, and would you like me to help you today? That's asking the question. That's a yes or a no. But if we're not there yet and we want to get a bit more information, so that would be like, what's been happening for you? That's a what. So, and then a how. How would that look if you were living somewhere else? Okay. Why do you think this is happening for you at the moment? Okay. And then when. So who, what, how, when, where, and why are how we do an open-ended question. So if you start with that and practice it, that's what our role plays are for, to help you be job ready or strengthen your skills if you're already a worker and you're looking for this qualification, because it positions you better in the job that you're doing. But people who are currently undertaking studies with HADA, who do feel that they're ready, and rather than wait, if you've got your suitability card, you're positive to work with children and young people, you might go, look, I'm really ready to start applying for work, and knowing that your qualifications, the units that you are completing, is demonstrating that you've got this knowledge. So everything that we do in class, that we do together as peers, how you support each other, is exactly what you would need in the sector. So your classes, your language, your understanding the industry currency is all about how to prepare you to be able to work in the sector or to strengthen your skills in the sector and take a lead type role. We jumped into breakout rooms and we practiced doing I'll be the client and I'll be the worker. And that was really valuable because it put people in that position of, wow, how did that conversation land with me? It put us in that space of how might that be heard by the client, and that gives us a connection with having an understanding. So understanding the complexities of family violence, it might be this similar process that we go through, but the stories will be different because everybody is. Identify and understand the behaviors of family violence. So what is it? It's the financial, emotional, psychological, physical, and verbal abuse. Financial abuse and restriction, isolating people from their friends and their family, having coercive control over them. This is in your learner's guide, and please do a little bit more research where I gave you a domestic family violence service, but please look up what's available in your local area, because if you've got a client come in, how could you refer them on to somewhere else? So that site that I gave you is just one site funded by the government, and they have a service model which could be quite different to another service model as well. And in wrapping up this session, so next week is actually we ran through, I gave you just a summary of it is. We had our final questions, which I did do. I also gave some feedback to everybody about what was going well and what they were doing, which was strength-based. And I had everybody do a check-in in the beginning and a check-out at the end, because it is heavy going. And if there is something about this topic afterwards, I like to let everybody know that you can check in with Lifeline on 13, 11, 14, or 13 Yarn if you are First Nation or Torres Strait Island. You can unpack this. So Lifeline are very used to students, uni students, and VET students, which is your vocational education student. You can say, look, we're covering a topic, it's pretty heavy going. I was just wondering how's the best way to cope with that without feeling like I'm flat or a little bit stuck. Or you can check in with us and have a one-on-one coaching session. We'll make it around skills specific and also around your assessment work. So to have a booking where you can do that through your learners portal. Want to speak to a trainer, then you can just book in when is that person most available. If it is a little more urgent, then please reach out and send me an email and I will give you an available time. And that's viki@haidainstitute.edu.au, which of course our learner support team are amazing. And then I also wanted to just say that if you're really enjoying your classes and you would like to give feedback, then Haida do have a feedback on their website. And then also at the bottom of my email, I always like to just direct people over. So if you feel that you want to give feedback on how you're going and you're halfway through, or there's an area that you would like to say, I'm really enjoying that, and share that with the others, then I invite you to do that as well. So please reach out, don't stay stuck with your studies. We offer classes, we offer this in a recording which you can watch at any time, and it's your resource. Your resources are in your learner's guide, and there's about a percentage of what we ask for you to do a journey. And you've got one-on-one support from myself as a trainer, and we have other trainers who can assist you with any of your task questions. So I'm hoping that you're enjoying your classes. Next week is our final week on this particular unit. And then after we finish next week, you will have 3 weeks to complete all of the tasks that are sitting there. But if you are feeling that you're a little bit behind and you would like some support, then please reach out. So take care, and we will check in with each other also next Tuesday night, and we will be wrapping up this unit.